أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول كريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Today I'd like to finish this portion on the sirat al-mustaqim. It's a segment from the book Isharatul I'jaz, The Signs of Miraculousness, and always recommend that you go back to these readings and slowly re-engage and go back and process some more and reflect some more. Alhamdulillah, I've been reading the Risale-i Nur for the past 25 years, and I never have the feeling that I've come to the end of it. Because every time as we are going through the journey of life, we come back with different experiences, different openings, and we've changed, we've evolved, and we should change and evolve and constantly advance, inshallah, come closer in our relationship with Allah. And we go through different life experiences. And so every time when we come to these readings, to the tafsir, there's another opening, another lesson, a wisdom that you take away. And so it always feels more refreshing, more insightful, and never having really the feeling that you've come to the end and say, "Oh, I've read it. I now understand it." It's really an ocean. And so in this segment on the Siratul Mustaqim, what I found so beautiful is really understanding that the Sharia is more than a set of do's and don'ts, but that the Sharia, the law of Allah or the divine law, has to be first so internalized, especially to these inner powers that we have been reflecting upon: the power of reason, the power of animal appetites, and the power of savage passion. So these were the three powers that were mentioned in this reading. So al-quwa al-aqliya, al-quwa al-shahawiyya, and al-quwa al-ghadabiyya. Three powers that Allah has endowed us with, but there is no innate limitation. And considering that Ramadan is around the corner, I think it's a beautiful reminder to come back to the power of animal appetites, to shahwa, al-quwa al-shahawiyya. We have desires. We have an appetite for the world, and there's no innate limitation. Those desires are endless. And this is the beauty, but also it's a challenge, because Allah wants us to be aware that there is a limitation. And if we are not putting those limitations that the Sharia recommends us, and the Sharia is nothing but guidance, right? It's not forcing us to follow the divine law, but it's saying you have these powers in you, these intrinsic feelings and emotions. And you might think that you're absolutely autonomous and free, but if you listen to your nafs, if you listen to these and follow these lower desires, they can actually harm you. And so to be hyper aware of these powers, that they are entrusted to me by my Creator, and that as a servant of Allah, I am called to use these powers in a wise way, in a mindful way, in a way that they not become harmful to myself, so that I don't oppress myself and not oppress others and not harm others. So this portion here on the shahwa of the human being, or the power of animal appetites, talks about the degrees of extreme, right? The sirat al-mustaqim is all about balance and wisdom. If I have an appetite for something, if I have a desire for something, to first restrain myself, to take a step back and say, is it worth wanting? Does the Prophet ﷺ wanted me to want it? Does Allah want me to want it? So really just this question, this inner gate first, is it worth wanting? Because otherwise the nafs wants everything. There's no limitation. And so as we are preparing for Ramadan, to really draw on this important lesson that there is liberation in self-restraint, that there is freedom in saying no to things sometimes. And not to go into that other extreme that is mentioned here, to say no to everything, because Allah doesn't want you to deny the world. Allah doesn't want us to escape from the world. Allah doesn't want us to be in an escapist mode and not savor the joys of life. There is a place for that, because this also instills in us gratitude and allows us for being grateful. But to not slavishly follow every appetite in our lives, but first have this internal uh, awareness. I'm wanting something, but is it worth wanting? And maybe saying no to some things, which I think a lot of us struggle saying no to things. I want to try this out and taste this, and I want to go into that and want to take this into my life. But to first be conscious and aware that what I'm taking in, is it supporting the life that I want to create, or is it harming on the long run, especially as I'm looking at my journey to the afterlife. So when I'm reading here, the deficiency in the power of animal appetites, so again, we have this power for many things. We have an appetite for the dunya. We have needs. We want to eat things. We want to drink things. We want to try out new things. We want to entertain ourselves. We sometimes entertain ourselves to death. We want to watch things. We want to see things. We want to travel. There's this huge appetite for the dunya. But the deficiency in the power of animal appetite, so there can be that other extreme, the lower extreme, is apathy and want of appetite, while its excess is profligacy, which is to desire whatever is encountered, whether lawful or unlawful. Its middle way is uprightness, which is desiring what is licit and shunning what is illicit. You may apply the principle applied to this power to any of its branches, such as eating, drinking, dressing, and so on. So in all of our lives, right, in all these aspects of our humanity, as we want things, we have an appetite for eating, drinking, dressing, to leave, to again live in a way that is aware of this immense responsibility to this power that Allah has given me appetites, but do I have to follow them in every regard? Right? And to first see, is that really something that is cultivating a healthier life? Is that something that is uplifting my spiritual life? Or is it actually harming me? And especially in our culture where there's so much emphasis on materialism and consumerism, to understand is to say no, to self-restrain yourself and take a step back and be patiently withholding a desire is healthy. It's liberating in all aspects, not just for my life, but also for community, for the creation at large. That's basically the problem right now, that when you look at consumer culture and fast fashion and the climate crisis, it all goes back to everyone's personal ethical lifestyle. Right? Sometimes the things we eat, right? Do I really need to eat strawberries in the winter? Now this has become a necessity, something that needs to be in our shelves. But ultimately, what has this appetite created? Harm to the creation. Because Allah wanted us to live seasonally and in sync with the creation. Now, because of an appetite that has no innate limitations, everything is on every shelf, but that also has harmed the creation, that other community that you're also responsible of. right? Whereas living seasonally, living locally, um, being in sync with the creation, living in harmony with the creation, all of these Allah established already in such beautiful, healthy ways. And He calls us in the Quran to maintain the balance. And here, sirat al-mustaqim is to uphold the balance and to strive for a life that is in harmony with the creation and to sometimes say no to things. And there's power in numbers, of course. If everybody does that, then things will change. So it comes down to this micro understanding of the Sharia, that those powers that I have, and how do I use them? How do I direct my appetites? How do I channel those? Do I follow them without any kind of gate of lawful and unlawful, haram and halal? So a wider perspective on life and understanding that this nafs here, this lower ego and its appetites can harm me and all my other circles of connection, the creation. And so it's really important to reflect on the Sharia and its innate application. First, I need to be aware of how I'm using these appetites. And it says here, you can apply this to all branches. What are you watching during the day? Right? Allah has given me these eyes. There's an appetite to look at everything, to read everything. But Allah says, lower your gaze. This is an indecent scene. This is immoral. This is improper. Don't take it in. Don't harm your heart. Don't engage in doom scrolling all day, but try to make a difference during the day, and be proactive. What does it help you when you sit for hours and then consume all these negative images, consume all the suffering and all the evil doing of people? It brings you into despair. It brings you into hopelessness, and it brings you into this negative corner. So these are all appetites. And if we are not careful, we become almost addicted. So even how we engage the channels of the heart, in what are we taking in, what are we listening to? And the pious people knew that they only had this moment, truly. If each of us knew we would only have an hour to live, how would we live that life? What would we take in? How would we be connected to Allah? If we really are present in the now, how would we eat? What would we consume? What would we watch? What would we listen to? What would we speak? How would we invest that time? Really knowing that is the last moment. That is my last moment. So how I'm eating, slowing down and mindfully eating even. Sadly, this is the case today, that you see people eating in rush, on the go, drive through. But sit down, look at the meal, engage all your senses, bring in your spirit, bring in your mind, cultivate your spirit, healthy spirit. And then your appetite becomes a means to elevate also your spiritual life, your mental life, your emotional life, and becomes a moment of intimate connection to Allah. Yes, a moment ago I have savored my coffee. Alhamdulillah, I was sitting. And this was a moment of joy for me, a moment of connecting to Allah, thinking about how He created the smell, how He favored my senses, how He brought this coffee from another country to my table, how many people are involved in the process. And to just incorporate our reflection into this aspect of eating and drinking, being fully present in what we are doing, as a moment of deep ikhlas, sincere connection to Allah, and bringing all your senses into one tawheed, instead of eating in rush and not truly reflecting, not slowing down, living in the next moment already because you have to get going to the next thing, whatever that next thing is. and not being fully present in what you're supposed to do right now. And that's the holy opening, that moment of eating or drinking. And the only difference between the human being and the animals is the aspect of reflection, that all these appetites also become a door of reflection to engage our senses and our emotions and our feelings. Excuse me. So then it's not just an animalistic um, action, just filling your stomach, but it becomes a moment of tafakkur, a moment of um, ibadah and dhikr. There's a hadith that says 1 hour of tafakkur uh, uh, is more worthy than 1 year of nawafil. 1 hour of tafakkur, slowing down, pausing, being mindful in your eating, engaging all your senses, and not simply an instant, a moment of gratification, a very short-lived pleasure. And this is why, especially in our consumer culture, and this is not just here, it's all around the world, or even in Muslim countries, this short-lived pleasure that doesn't make people happy. But if you sit down and savor that cup of coffee or whatever your delight is, it can become a spiritual delight, an everlasting joy, an eternal pleasure. That is what we are striving for. And that moment becomes eternal. It's not short-lived. It's eternal. It's in your eternal investment account because you have truly connected that moment to the divine. That is why the sunnah is so important. In all the habits of the Prophet ﷺ, eating and drinking and dressing, he always finds an opening to Allah, always connects us with a prayer, always is mindfully present in all of these habitual acts of sleeping, eating, drinking. It doesn't become simply an animalistic exercise. It becomes a very holy exercise, so much so that Allah says, do it the way he did. There are many ways of eating and drinking, many ways of sleeping, many ways of walking and smiling, many ways of preparing your meal. But what is the most beautiful way of doing this? The way that the Prophet ﷺ engaged in. When he looked at the moon, what was his thought? When he looked at the flower, at the child, how did he engage in that holy moment? Those are the things that we are striving for and that Allah wants us to aspire. That sacred presence. And this is why those human acts of eating, drinking, dressing are very important moments of divine encounter. But we quickly, throughout the day, because it's such a fast-paced culture, we always live in the next moment. But we have to draw back and slow down, be fully present. I'm here now. And what am I doing now? I want to engage mentally fully, emotionally fully, spiritually fully. And that's the whole enterprise of Islam is peace. That moment that you find yourself connected to Allah in that act, that is peace. That is Islam. Holistic surrender. All of your senses are in harmony, connected together, present. And so this is a challenge, of course. So Islam is a lifelong journey to bring all of these senses into harmony at peace while we are savoring. And so there's nothing wrong to have that appetite, right? But in a way that fosters the well-being of all my aspects of humanity, not just my nafs. I have my ruh, I have my brain, I have my reason, I have my body. Right? So that's why the Quran tells us to consume wholesome food, tayyib food. Do not serve anything that is processed, prepared in a rush, modified, as much as we can, trying to really take in, consume things that are less touched, less processed. That is the goal, especially in Ramadan too. Like even when we are preparing our meals, to engage our senses in that holy act of cooking and preparing. And we talked about this last time, but as we are preparing for Ramadan, to lessen the food intake, but to make space for all the spiritual senses. That's the goal. How much can we benefit from the spiritual feast? And if I spend more time in the kitchen preparing food, that's also not uh, in the spirit of Ramadan. So to live a life that has a light footprint in the world, but leave a heavy spiritual legacy in the world. And that is the goal. And with the Sharia here goes deeper, to be aware of these powers and to channel, direct, and navigate them in a way that also sometimes steps back and says, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. I should not take that into my life. That applies to everything. Can be appliances, it can be things you buy. If something becomes a burden in your life, if you end up serving it more than it serves you, then that appetite was not used wisely. You are not created to be a servant of furniture, of appliances, of things. So less is always better, is always more than weighing yourself down with clutter. And that can start with having too many apps on your phone. That creates too much distraction, too many WhatsApp groups, and appetite to be everywhere. You don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to read everything. I love books, but I realize I have only so much time left. I need to be clear what my appetite is, what is truly necessary in this time, because time is a very precious, limited resource. What do I watch? And what I watch with my family, is that again uplifting? Is that cultivating a healthier family life? All of these things. So when we apply the Sharia to our animal appetites, what to watch, what to see, what to consume, what to read, it will help us to live the life of sirat al-mustaqim. So that can be applied to anything, anything. So the principle is clear here. So the last passion is the deficiency in the power of savage passion, al-quwa al-ghadabiyya, or anger, right? Like deficiency in the power of savage passion. We all have a destructive potential. We all can be angry. We have anger. We can be violent. We can be destructive. We can be hurtful and harmful. Na'uzu billah, may Allah protect us. That's why it's important to always say, Astaghfirullah, Ya Allah, I have this potential to be destructive, to create evil in the world. That's a huge potential we all are born with. We have the power to harm, and we have the power to hurt. We have the power to destroy, and we see how dangerous that power can be. And we are all born with that dual aspect of our fitrah. That same human being can create things that uplifts the life of millions and billions on this planet. But then the same human nature can also destroy and um, commit atrocities and crime in the world as well. And then what do you think? You don't think it's just that person. No, I have that power too. One word. There are people who don't talk to each other for 20 or more years because of a word that person said that was so hurtful, they can never forget or forgive. Because the power of our destructive abilities, that even our words can be so hurtful and harmful and painful. And yet also our words can be so healing. So we decide how we use these powers. We are in control. We can seek forgiveness, we can apologize, we can express affection. But at the same time, the power of anger and savage passion, that lower ego, the nafs al-ammara, can lead us to live like savages, wild, evil. May Allah protect us, can even become soldiers of shaitan. Shaitan is just watching. And we see that all the time. We open history books. We see it right now in front of our very eyes. How the power of anger, how the power of that destructive potential can create so much harm in people's lives. So we need to fear that, seek refuge to Allah from that. Ya Allah, keep this power in check. Let me not hurt or harm anyone. But if you don't use it where it's needed, it becomes cowardice, it says here. Deficiency in the power of savage passion is cowardice, that is fear of what is not to be feared, and delusive imagining. Sometimes we fear things that are not, they should not be feared, and that savage passion is also given us to protect our lives, to defend ourselves. That's important. But then we create or fear things that should not be feared, or create delusions in our minds, or ruminations, or waswasa, or ilham. And we fear things that are non-existent. It's not here. Like, why are you afraid? And there's a saying in the Risale-i, it says, do not cry before you are beaten. That's an important principle, which I think is very important. It's non-existent, so don't give the event the color of existence. Let it arrive first. Do not create that worry. Let it arrive first in your life, and then Allah will equip you with the power and the ability to protect yourself, give you enough patience. I embody that, right? We have such a great fear for things that can potentially happen. But if we live with fear, we actually harm ourselves. So we wait for that event to first come into existence if Allah's wisdom requires it. And then we are also equipped by Allah to respond to it with uh, with with the emotions that are needed in that moment. But if we create delusions already, we are destroying our lives. So that is another deficiency when we talk about the quwa al-ghadabiyya, the savage passion, is to not get into defensive mode in front of some things that are non-existent. What if I could get into that? What if I'm getting sick? What if? Not to live in those non-existential moments, but to be fully present in the now and use your energy and all your mental potential for the now, right? It's very important. That's why ikhlas is really the mindful living in the moment, and say, I have only this day, I have only this moment, and I need to be fully focusing on this and not into a future that is non-existent, because that can create unnecessary fear. That is the deficiency part, right? We talked about what is the sirat al-mustaqim of these powers, but its excess is uncontrolled anger, which is the progenitor of despotism, domination, and tyranny. And its middle way is courage, shaja'a, which is giving freely of oneself with love and eagerness for the defense of the laws of Islam and the upholding of the word of divine unity. Apply the same principle to each of its branches. So I think that's also clear. To have courage, that is the sirat al-mustaqim, that Allah has given you. You are afraid of something, but you're not, when you see that there is a threat or a potential danger, and you are courageously facing and confronting it. You're not running away from it. And to have that wisdom to know, okay, I really need to step up here. And we see that again in the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's life. This is not to say to go and create anarchy and take on arms. This is not what it's meant. But if there is a responsibility, right, and individually everyone needs to decide what that is, to speak up or to do something, then you show courage, shaja'a, and you're not afraid. You're saying, Allah calls me to confront that now, right? And I need to be courageous in that. And so we see the Prophet ﷺ being always at the front when it was situation of conflict, because what is needed there is to defend. is to protect, right? And so in that moment, we step up courageously and we use this defensive mechanism that Allah has given us to protect life, to uphold His word and His justice. But the other is what? Uncontrolled anger with words, with you name it, actions, harming anybody you want, letting your destructive potential go without any inner checks. And that is the root cause of despotism, domination, and tyranny. That even we see the beauty of Islamic law and Islamic ethics is that even in war situations, there's an ethical conduct to be maintained. So much so that not allowed to cut off trees, not to harm civilians, protect the monasteries and churches. This is in all legal books. Subhanallah. I mean, this is in the 7th century, already anchored, right, in the prophetic model, how to how to conduct yourself in a war zone and in conflict in times of tension. That there is still the highest ethics are upheld in that situation. Where do we see that? Right? This is absent in today's world. These high religious ideals and ethics, how to, even in situations of conflict, to uphold justice and let not your anger go uncontrolled. And to have that inner check, subhanallah. We know, for example, in one narration, there was a in a conflict situation, right, where Imam Ali radiallahu anh wanted to, Imam Ali or maybe another Sahaba wanted to kill another enemy in war. And then in that moment, that person spits on his face and then he puts back his sword away. And then the person is surprised. Why don't you kill me? And I think the Sahaba said in that moment, I wanted to kill you for Allah, but here in this moment, you have spit into my face. I would have done it for my lower ego, for my nafs, and that is not sincere, and that is not ikhlas anymore, right? Like have that inner check, like the awareness of your powers, like, and the intention in that heated moment to be hyper conscious of what am I doing? What was my intention here? What was my holy cause? I didn't want to enter this for selfish reasons. And in that moment, the person embraces Islam because he is in admiration of these high ethics and the high ideals, how Muslims are conducting themselves, even in that heated moment, to be aware of these powers and say, there's no sincere intention anymore. I'm not here anymore present for Allah, but my nafs has overcome me. So I'm stepping back. What a beautiful awareness, right? Like how somebody in that moment uh, of conflict and of that heated moment can be so aware of their inner world, of their emotions, and then says, that defeats the purpose, and I'm not here anymore in the name of Allah, but in the name of my nafs. My nafs is taken over, so I need to withdraw. Subhanallah, this is how we are aware in that moment of our anger. Am I upset about something, or am I yelling at my child or disciplining my child because my nafs is displeased, or I'm bothered by something in the community, or am I truly there for Allah in the name of Allah, using my anger, using uh, my attitude of expressing, I'm displeased with something, or I'm bothered by something. Is that a nafs reaction, or is that in the name of Allah? So even there, and if it's in the name of our nafs, if it's a selfish reason, expressing my anger for my ego, then it's counterproductive. That person whomever you are engaging with in that moment, will not be responsive to your criticism or to your anger, because it doesn't come from a place of sincerity. And even anger, how we channel it and direct it, all of this, the Prophet ﷺ shows us that we do not allow our anger to overcome us, but to use it wisely. Again, in those moments where courage is needed, that we use it in constructive ways to be agents of justice and peace, and that we are not going to cause tyranny and domination, and that we do not respond to evil with evil. So that is the greatest jihad. The greatest jihad, the greatest struggle is against our nafs, and to be aware of why are we upset about a situation, or why are we displeased about a certain situation. How do we express it to the other person? Is it because of my own selfish reasons, or is it really for the sake of Allah, for the love of Allah? So to always have those internal checks in mind, I think is very important as we walk through life, and then that helps us to live on the sirat al-mustaqim, God willing, inshallah. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.